Here in Washington, D.C., on Capitol Hill, behind me, a common sight in this city over the last couple months. The National Guard deployed. Massive gates and riot garrisons all around national monuments. This city looking like a war zone. That is what you have dealt with all summer long if you live in Washington, D.C. History didn't start yesterday. History didn't start this week. And the culture of political violence in this country is systemic and it needs to stop. Where does it come from? Who normalized it? Why are some people suddenly selectively outraged? And how do we stop having our national treasures and our national consciousness look like a foreign war zone? We're going to explore the recent history and the normalization of political violence in our country on this week's episode of Benny on the Block. It's not what we were planning on doing. It's not what we necessarily wanted to do, but we're going to do it because it's important. Because it's very important to understand where this comes from, who's enabling it, and who's funding it so that it can stop. On January 20th, 2017, the day of Donald Trump's inauguration, Washington, D.C. looked like a war zone. Here are the images of leftists attacking police and setting our nation's capital ablaze. Days after the inauguration, Madonna encouraged leftists at a massive rally in Washington, D.C. to blow up the White House. Listen to them cheer when she says this.
Yes, I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
Just moments later, Kathy Griffin, an alleged comedian, posed with a photo of the decapitated head of the President of the United States. The most violent attack in congressional history took place soon thereafter when a President Trump-hating leftist named James Hodgkinson opened fire on congressional conservatives, members of Congress, who were practicing for a baseball game. Hodgkinson said on social media, "Trump is a traitor. Trump has destroyed our democracy. It's time to destroy Trump." He also volunteered for Bernie Sanders. Here is prominent leftist Maxine Waters 1 year after the congressional shooting.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
That is dehumanizing language that leads to violence. And that's exactly what happened. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders attacked in public by leftists. Senator Ted Cruz attacked in public by leftists. Tucker Carlson's wife and family home attacked by leftists. Rand Paul attacked by leftists with a hammer and sent to the hospital.
And so then people say, oh, well, I kind of deserve this because it was a dispute or it was an altercation. And it's like, well, no, I haven't had any conversation with this guy and I get attacked from behind, don't know he's coming. And the first thing I know is 6 of my ribs are broken. So it's been a tough time.
Capitol Hill was a war zone during the Kavanaugh hearings. I was there. Hearing rooms and Senate offices were stormed by the mob. The Capitol steps and Supreme Court were stormed as well. 18 months after Kavanaugh's violent confirmation, a vicious, deadly Antifa and BLM protest began to overflow onto American streets. Dozens of innocent Americans were killed, including President Trump supporters who were hunted in the streets like dogs and murdered. Hundreds of millions of dollars in property damage, lives forever destroyed by the leftist mob. Leftists and journalists today are horrified by the damage and looting of our U.S. Capitol. Rightfully so, we all should be. But if you didn't say anything about the carnage this summer, then shut up. Historic churches in Washington, D.C. were set ablaze, and the left said nothing. The White House grounds were set ablaze, and the left said nothing. We covered it extensively on this show. We were there. A federal courthouse was bombed and attacked by a leftist mob for over 60 days. The leftist mob sent dozens of federal officers to the hospital after their attacks, ceaseless attacks, for months on end attacks on this federal courthouse. Did you hear a word about it from the left? Did you hear a single denunciation of this attack from the left? Of course you didn't. Soon to be Vice President Kamala Harris, in fact, supported bail for rioters and looters in Minneapolis. Her tweet is still up. Soon to be President of the United States, Joe Biden, had multiple members of his campaign donate to free violent protesters and domestic terrorists from jail. AOC and Sally Cohn and CNN's Chris Cuomo encouraged the violent explicitly.
Now, too many see the protests as the problem. No, the problem is what forced your fellow citizens to take to the streets: persistent and poisonous inequities and injustice. And please, show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
Will you condemn Antifa for the attack in Washington?
We'll be making statements.
It's easy to condemn a terrorist attack.
When asked to denounce Antifa and the death and horror they have caused, soon-to-be President of the United States, Joe Biden, refused, and he called Antifa an idea.
Antifa's an idea, not an organization.
Oh, you got it.
Not militia.
Yes, we got to this day because leftists have normalized and endorsed political violence. They did it for power. This has broken our nation, and so spare me your newfound outrage, you soulless ghouls. We will always denounce political violence and the desecration of our nation, right or left. You have no constitutional or lawful right to harm another person or destroy their property. We are proud on this show, Benny on the Block, to be morally and intellectually consistent on this point, and we will remain so because we are conservatives and we love this country. Yes, it is irrefutable and factual that the left has institutionalized, normalized, encouraged, and yes, even funded political violence in this country over the course of the last couple of years. That is something that people need to be ashamed of, and it's something that needs to stop immediately. The normalization of political violence on both sides will merely be an equal and opposite reaction, thermodynamic. It won't end well for anyone. The more that people push, see this? I'm getting screamed at right here in the middle of my monologue. The more that people push to one side, the more they're going to get pushed back. So this cycle needs to end now, and it needs to stop with decent and reasonable people deciding on the things that we have in common instead of focusing on the things we do not have in common. That's how you rebuild the fabric of America, and that's how you have a country again. Hoping for a better America, Benny Johnson, this week's Benny on the Block. See ya.